Thank you everyone for joining us for our latest CPD Live this morning. This morning we have got Holly Goodwin joining us to talk about safe recruitment. So Holly, over to you.
Morning everyone, thanks for joining me, and I've seen most of you I think on my safeguarding courses, so it's really nice to see you again. So we're going to be looking at safe recruitment. It's quite a small group, so there will be time for questions at the end, but if we could leave all questions to the end, that would be fantastic. You can, however, just pop them in the chat as I'm talking, so that if something comes to you, then I can answer it at the end. So welcome. Right, let's get going. So I just wanted to start really with what is safer recruitment and why has it got an R in front of it? Why is it not safe recruitment? And that's because it really is the best we can do, safer recruitment. It's about preventing people from accessing children or vulnerable adults for the wrong reasons and getting there through your organisation. So we want to try to stop those people from accessing children. Unfortunately, we know that people who are interested in abusing children will aim to access them through some kind of organisation where they have that one-to-one access. And obviously schools are vulnerable to this, tutoring organisations are vulnerable to this, other places as well where people can access children one-to-one. So we want to try to prevent that. We also want to ensure that applicants are really carefully vetted and checked before they join. So we are doing what we would call our due diligence to try to make sure that we've done everything we can to stop somebody, to put somebody off, to tell somebody that we are not the right place to come to if they want to access children for the wrong reason. And I think also safe recruitment doesn't end when you engage somebody or appoint somebody, whatever terminology you want to use. It is about that continuous vigilance and keeping a close eye on everyone who works with you or for you. And obviously, we have got different models with the business and the agency. That's not my area of expertise, so I do apologise if at times I might use, the wrong term in terms of staff or something like that. Just please adapt whatever terms I'm using for your organisation. So just really to say that safer recruitment is the best that we can do. We can't have, unfortunately, safe recruitment because people will and people do jump through all the hoops and slip through the net, and it does happen. So the other thing I want to say right at the beginning is if something does happen with you and somebody does slip through the net, you just need to make sure that you have done all of your due diligence. You can evidence all of that. And please don't blame yourself because people will try anything, unfortunately, to achieve their aims. So we are looking at safer recruitment, and it is the best that we all can do. And the fact that you are here today or listening to this recording maybe on YouTube shows that you are really, really committed to that safer recruitment, where actually, you are following best practice and you are really being, a forward planner and a forward thinker in our field. So I wanted to talk about a safer recruitment policy. What does that include? What should that include? So everyone should have a safer recruitment policy. It should have on there a few things, and I've listed them on the screen. I'm just going to run through what they mean. Some of them are really obvious anyway. Make sure you've got some core principles in there. So you've probably got for your agency or your business some kind of statement of what you want to achieve with it. And part of that will be to do with safeguarding children or vulnerable adults. It will be to do with the principle of you want to make sure that the welfare of children is paramount, and you want to make sure that all of the people who come to work with you are working there for the right reasons and they are committed to safeguarding children. So just make sure that the principles that are in your safeguarding policy are also reflected in your safer recruitment policy as well. You should have some references to appropriate legislation. A lot of what I'm talking about today is based on Keeping Children Safe in Education 2025. There will obviously be a new version of that coming out probably next month, maybe early July. and then coming into force on the 1st of September. So just keep an eye out for that. And making sure as well that you have references to data protection, which we will go into a little bit more later in terms of what you can record when there is an allegation against a tutor who's working with you. So get your references to appropriate legislation in there at the start as well. Make sure you say who's got the responsibility for safe recruitment. So who is the person who is in charge of the policy, who manages the safe recruitment, who people come to if they have concerns, things like that. And it may be you, it may be your designated safeguarding lead, it might be somebody else if you're not available, if you've got a deputy. What is your procedure that you follow? So obviously that's important to outline. The reason it's really important to get this right on your policy is if there is an issue, we can come back to it and we can say, okay, so was the procedure followed? Did anything go wrong? And we can review it and we can change it. And it's all about learning, isn't it, from things that have gone wrong and reviewing things. So just checking you've got a procedure, you know what you're doing. Safer recruitment training that you've had. There are safer recruitment courses that you can buy from various people. And obviously you've got today as well. So you should really just make sure that you've got the level of safe recruitment training that is required. I know some local authorities, when you are tendering for contracts and things like that, will ask for a specific level of safe recruitment training. So do just get in touch with me if you want to discuss that further, because I can recommend some courses that you can do. And make sure that in your safe recruitment policy, you make it really clear what your job description is for your tutors that you're going to be engaging, what the person specification is. So for example, you always want somebody who is keen to work with children and passionate about helping children, and somebody who will always safeguard all the children who they work with. So things like that, you can actually put those in your safe recruitment policy so that it's really, really clear to everyone that you are looking for people who will prioritise the welfare of children and who are passionate about working with children as well. That means that if you find out when you're interviewing that perhaps they don't meet those criteria, perhaps you have a bit of a concern that comes up, you know, that this person is not that keen on working with children and just seems to want to know some slightly odd details, you can come back to your job description, your person specification in your safe recruitment policy and say, look, it just doesn't match up. Advertising, so where will you advertise? How will you advertise? Will you put a commitment to safeguarding in your advert as well, right at the top? And how will that be worded? So you could, for example, say in every advert, including those communicated via WhatsApp, if you're using the TTA jobs board, we will state our commitment to safeguarding children. Pre-employment checks, so what checks are you doing? And obviously we will look at those in a little bit more detail, with DBS being the main one in England and Wales, and then we've got other checks in Scotland and Northern Ireland as well. Interviews, so what will you do? Do you interview people? If you do, how many people are interviewing? Has one person had safe recruitment training? Do you ask safeguarding scenarios in your interview? What would you do if you had any concerns following the interview? Those kind of things should be in there as well. Information on references. So do you ask for 2 references? Do you check one of them? Again, we'll have a look at that in a bit more detail. All of this can go into your policy, because if it's in there, it just makes it much safer, because if there is an issue, you can go back to it and check. If you have a concern, or another person comes to you with a concern, you can say, okay, let's go back to the safe recruitment policy. Let's see what the issue is here, and let's see whether we should take this applicant forward or not. And then induction. I know this is a challenging thing for agency/business, which I'm not going to go into in detail, but we were talking on the Safeguarding for Tuition Businesses course about this, and just saying that you can state that you would like them to read this document and you would like them to complete this safeguarding training. But the wording of that obviously is really important for some people, so make sure that you check that. But you can say what induction you provide for tutors, of course, in your safer recruitment policy. So we provide safeguarding training, we provide keeping children safe in education to all applicants, and then whether or not they actually read it or not is another matter and another issue for IR 35 or whatever it's called. Okay, so before the interview, just making sure that you've got this really clear statement of the organisation's commitment to safeguarding and promoting the welfare of children. The reason I keep talking about this statement is it puts people off. So if you look at job adverts for tutors, a lot of them will not mention safeguarding at all. If you've got time, do a little survey and see what you can find. But if you do mention safeguarding, you will be putting people off who will go and apply to somebody else with that intent of accessing children one-to-one for the wrong reasons. And you are keeping yourself safer with that statement, because they'll think, okay, this person knows what they're talking about, I'm going to go somewhere else. And you don't want that person working with you anyway. Give them a copy of the DBS guidelines that you are working with, including what regulated work, regulated activity means with children. Again, it's about slightly bombarding people with safeguarding information and just saying, look, we're really committed to this as an organisation. We are not going to let anything jump through our hoops if we can possibly help it. We are going to make sure that everybody is properly checked. And just explain that it is an offence to apply for the role if you are barred from working in regulated activity with children. Some people will be on the barred list, and some people will still try to apply as a tutor. I have had conversations with tutoring agencies and business who are really surprised that somebody would do that. They say, well, surely they knew we'd find out. But actually, of course, these people will try anything, and they will hope that you are not checking. So make it clear that they are not to apply for a role with you if they are on that children's barred list. There is a separate adults barred list as well. So if that applies to you for whatever reason, if your main business is working with adults for some reason, then you may like to do an adults barred list as well. You can only do an adults barred list check if you're the person that you're checking is going to be working with adults. So you need to be a little bit careful about that. Before the interview, so some of you might shortlist and some of you might not. It's kind of a term that comes from bigger companies, isn't it, where or schools where you've got quite a few applicants for one position and you are narrowing it down to 3 or 4 who you've decided that you're going to interview for that position. So if you are shortlisting, this is what you can do. You can ask them whether they agree to their references being taken up before interview. They are allowed to say no. And there might be a reason for that. And you can explore that reason with them. Is it that they just had a very poor experience at a school or something? And actually, some of you that might resonate with some of you, that you actually that's the reason you're in tutoring, because you actually had a poor experience. And so that's absolutely fine. I can completely understand that. I would just reassure them that you're asking for a very basic reference here. You're asking for when they worked there and whether there were any child protection concerns. You're not asking for the head teacher to give you a detailed list of all the awful meetings that they had together. You're not asking about any of that. You're literally just asking for those 2 basic facts. You can ask them to fill in a self-declaration form or a statement just to say they know of no reason why they're not suitable to work with children, and you can get an electronic signature on that. That's absolutely fine. You can ask for a career history. You can ask for explanation of any gaps. The thing we're looking for there is someone in prison, basically. So someone who's got a gap in their career history and they can't explain it. Now, people have gaps in their career histories for all sorts of reasons, and you don't need details about the illness or the bereavement or whatever it was. It could be having children, it could be caring for an elderly parent, it could be something personal, such as a period of poor mental health that actually they don't want to go into much more detail about. But you know that they're telling the truth. You can just tell, because actually maybe they become a little bit emotional when they're talking about it, and you just say, fine, okay, we're not going to explore that any further at the moment. However, you are interested, I think, with longer gaps in this. You are looking at, you know, somebody who's perhaps completely off the radar for a number of years because they've been in prison. So you have to use your experience and your professional curiosity to find out a little bit more about it. People generally who have got valid reasons for gaps in their career history will not mind explaining them. So, for example, I've had 2 children, I've got gaps in my career history, and I'm absolutely fine to talk about that. I can tell you exactly when my children were born. I can tell you exactly what I was doing when they were at home. You know, it's quite easy to explain it. What I would say around that is, if you get an inkling, a nagging doubt is how Keeping Children Safe describes it, okay, about a concern, act on it. Think, okay, I'm going to either ask another question, which for safeguarding purposes you're absolutely allowed to do, or you might just decide not to proceed with that applicant, with that person. So you can complete a social media search. I know there are companies who can do this for you, but it depends what, you know, what your capability is. Obviously, what you're looking for there is, firstly, anything about the applicant that they haven't disclosed to you. So on occasion, I have found information about people in the media that they haven't disclosed to me when I've been doing these. So, for example, somebody who's been convicted of a crime that they haven't disclosed on their self-declaration or on their form. Now, that crime might not always be relevant to tutoring. Sometimes it could be to do with financial fraud or something like that. And that's for you then to explore and to decide to move on. But occasionally it is relevant. So it could be a conviction for something which you think, hang on a minute, this is not compatible with working with children one-to-one. The other thing you're looking for at the moment, I would say quite importantly, is extremist views. So these are sometimes expressed by people online, and they don't think anyone will ever find them. And actually, those extremist views may make you feel that this person is not suitable to work one-to-one with children. It might be because they are working with a particular group of children in your local area. It might be because you just feel that makes them unsuitable. And that's absolutely fine. There is also the TRA, the Teaching Regulation Authority panel outcomes list, which will give you a list of all of the panels where teaching staff have been brought in front of this authority, and it has been decided that either they are barred from teaching completely, or they might be barred for a shorter period of time, like 2 years or something, and then it will be reviewed. So you can also check that list as well. And it's all public. It's completely public knowledge, what's on there. So you're not doing anything which is private. You're not looking at anyone's details which isn't public. So do have a look at that as well if you are employing qualified teachers, just in case they haven't disclosed something. Sometimes things take a long time as well to come through to the DBS. So these panel outcomes are published immediately, and you will be able to see the reason why somebody has been barred indefinitely from teaching, or why somebody has been barred for a shorter period of time. Whichever is the case, I obviously wouldn't take that application forward if they are barred from teaching, because that's an indication they're probably not suitable to work with children. We'll take questions at the end, Daddy, if that's okay. So at the interview, you can then explore any gaps, as I've talked about. You can discuss any declarations of cautions or convictions. Now, some cautions or convictions won't appear on the DBS because they've been spent, and therefore someone might disclose something. So I've had disclosures of cautions and convictions which haven't appeared on the DBS, but the applicant has wanted me to know about them because they've wanted, you know, to be very transparent and open about it. Now, actually, that's a really positive thing from somebody. And the last one I can think of, so this is when I was working in schools, was somebody who had a caution for fraud. And that had been spent. It wasn't on their DBS anymore, and they just wanted to be really transparent. They wanted to explain it actually to me, what had happened, why they now felt they were a very different person, and the role that the applicant was applying for had nothing to do with money. They weren't going to have any access to money. They weren't going to be transferring money or anything like that. And I felt that did not apply to their role, so I was happy to proceed with that, obviously in discussion with other people on the panel as well. So sometimes things don't appear on DBSs, but people will be quite transparent about it, and that is a good thing. I would look favourably on somebody who's happy to disclose things to you. What are the reasons that they want to work with children? So, you know, just ask them, you know, why do you want to work with children, particularly if they haven't worked with children in the past, and perhaps this is a new development for them. So what attracts them to working with children? What's the reason? Is it because they want to share their skills? You know, what is it? And again, sometimes people will reveal things and you'll think, I'm not sure about that. You know, so somebody, for example, who says that they believe that adults and children are equal or something like that, or, oh, I just want to be their friend. I've had things like that said to me in interviews, and I'm just thinking, that's not really suitable. It's not that kind of situation. And I would give them 2 safeguarding scenarios. The reason I say 2 is because sometimes people will mess up the first one and because they're really nervous. And so I want always to give somebody another chance. We all get nervous at times doing different things, and we all mess things up. And actually, if they do get nervous, it's sometimes because they really care about the job and they care about the situation. And I also want people to feel comfortable talking. And if that scenario has triggered something for them emotionally, I want them to have a chance to do another one. So if I find that somebody is emotionally flustered or struggling with the first one, I'll move to some other questions, and I'll say to them, we're going to come back and we're going to do a different scenario later in the interview. And this time I'll give them a little bit more time before I start asking for their answer, because I do think that we have to be kind and considerate and compassionate as well with people in interview. So, however, if they mess the second one up as well and really can't answer that either, that might be an indication to me that maybe they can't manage it. So do just give them time, do give them 2, and do split them up if necessary. And do remember that people have had difficult lives sometimes. Domestic abuse is incredibly common in this country, and we do need to be really, really sensitive to that as well. So references. I did a reference yesterday, got a phone call within half an hour to verify it verbally. And when I phoned, they just answered the phone with, good afternoon. And I said, oh, I'm Holly Goodwin. I've just completed a reference, and I'm assuming this is the call to verify. And they said, oh, yes, thank you for confirming your name. So it was very sort of mysterious because they wanted me to confirm that I was the person. And then they said, and who did you write the reference for? And I was able to say who it was, obviously. So because when you're phoning a mobile number, you don't always know who you're speaking to. It is a good idea to try and get that information out of them. So just you know, I was absolutely fine with that. I was actually happier that they were a bit mysterious on the phone, because I thought, yeah, this is good, because I could be anyone on the phone. So if it's possible, obviously try to ask for one from a previous employer or an agency. Some people have been self-employed for years and years, and so if possible, if they've worked for another tuition business, try and see if they can do a reference for you, because otherwise it's quite tricky, isn't it? And if possible, try to get one from a role where they were working with children. As I say, not everyone has worked with children before, but if it's possible, that should be your policy. Any issues which arise from the references are generally now quite short. So you can obviously get them to fill in a specific form with specific questions on it to make it short, or you can ask them just for a statement and say, this is what you want from the reference. You just want when they work there, any safeguarding child protection concerns, any reason that the applicant shouldn't work with children. But obviously some people do disclose other issues in the reference. And if any of those relate to safeguarding or child protection, you should explore them and just say, you know, to the applicant that there were some concerns raised in the reference. Is there anything they'd like to say about them? But they shouldn't have been disclosed if they were allegations which didn't meet the harm threshold, or which have been false, unfounded, unsubstantiated, or malicious. So you have got to be a little bit careful, but people don't really know that they shouldn't disclose stuff sometimes, so they do. So I think it's fine just to explore that briefly with the candidate as well. Checks, we'll move on to looking at checks. So you should do an ID check. There is a website linked in the slides in terms of how you do that. You should do an enhanced DBS, PVG, Access NI check with a Children's Barred List check. Children's Barred List check exists in England, Wales, Scotland and Northern Ireland. And you should do a mental and physical health check as well, applicable to the role. So for example, if you are asking somebody to work with children one-to-one, I think it's absolutely fine to ask about their prior health, and that includes mental health and physical health, anything that you would need to adjust for them, anything that you would need to put in place. If they don't disclose anything, fine, you can't act on it. If they do disclose something, you can explore what extra support they might need. Because obviously adults do have a right to privacy, so they may decide that they're not going to disclose something. The most challenging situation I had with that was somebody who didn't disclose that they had a fairly serious mental health issue. And because they didn't disclose it, when it transpired, when this mental health issue transpired, it was much, much more difficult for us to deal with. So it is easier if people do disclose it at the beginning so that you can put that support in place. The right to work in the UK and the qualifications you can check if they're a requirement of the role. So if you ask for everyone to have QTS, you can ask to check their QTS. If you don't, then you can't, because you're not asking for that to be a requirement of the role. So totally up to you what you're asking for. You might ask for somebody who's got, for example, GCSEs at grade C or equivalent, a grade 6, 5 or equivalent. Again, if you've asked for those, then you should check that they've actually got them. So DBS, ideally you should see the original copy. So DBS updated its service about the update service quite recently, where it said that actually if you're checking the update service, you should have actually seen the original paper copy of the DBS certificate. Now that is quite challenging for a lot of organisations, particularly tutoring organisations. So I know that John is exploring that and has gone back to DBS to ask them about it. And obviously we will update everybody as soon as we get a reply there. But it does, you need to be aware that it does state that you should have seen the paper copy if you're checking the update service. And I know that's really difficult. If there is a caution or conviction which appears on a DBS, please seek advice. I am more than happy to provide advice around that. Obviously, keep your email anonymous. Don't tell me the name of the person, but you can obviously tell me what has appeared. And I'm happy to provide advice around that and have a discussion around that. If you are going to check the DBS update service, you need written consent from the person whose whose certificate you are checking on the update service, and make sure you record that you've got that consent as well. And don't keep a copy of the original certificate for any longer than necessary. Shouldn't be kept for more than 6 months. It should be destroyed as soon as the recruitment process has been completed. So what you can do is keep a note of the date when you checked the original certificate, but you shouldn't need to be keeping a copy of the original certificate at all. Overseas checks. So if somebody has lived and worked abroad, you can ask them to get a letter to confirm that when they were living there, there were no restrictions or sanctions on them. So normally it would be some kind of education ministry or something in that country. And this is up to the applicant to provide for you. So if they've been working somewhere, and obviously you need something, don't you, from that place to show you that there were no issues when they were there. It's not someone who goes abroad for a 2 weeks on holiday. It's someone who's been working in another country for a substantial amount of time. And if they are currently living abroad as well, there are guidelines from gov.uk around applying for criminal records checks from someone who is overseas. A little bit more of a complicated scenario. You may wish to only engage people who are able to access DBS or PVG or access NI. So with all of this, record keeping is so important, isn't it? Because if we have an issue in the future, what we want to be able to do is to go back to our documentation, back to our safe recruitment policy, back to what we sometimes call our single central record or our CRM. And we want to have evidence that we checked, that we did our duty. So our policy will tell us what our procedures are, and it will tell us what we did in the interview. And you may have interview notes that you've kept. That would also be useful if possible, but obviously you don't have to do all this. Then you want to have a date when you check their ID. You want to have a date when they check their DBS certificate, a date when you saw the original copy. I know that's a bit challenging. A date when you check their right to work in the UK. Obviously also confirmation that this was all okay and it was suitable. A date when you checked their professional qualifications. And any dates when you checked if the individual has worked outside the UK. That working outside the UK thing can be really challenging. And actually, I've done safeguarding audits in schools where it's been a real problem because they have people coming over and they're finding that those people can't start work because we're still waiting for that information. If that is the case, you can undertake a risk assessment to just say, well, look, I've checked all these other things. I'm literally just waiting for this one thing. I'm happy for you to proceed with starting work if you just sign this to say, you know, that we're waiting for this and that, you know, as soon as it comes through, we'll put it on the system. And these are the checks we've done already. So there are ways around it if you're waiting for something to do it, as long as you risk assess the situation. And you say how you've come to the conclusion that you think they should start work. And then I know we've got lots of questions. So ongoing vigilance is really important as well. We talk a lot on the Safeguarding for Tuition Businesses course about this as well. So unfortunately, safer recruitment sometimes goes wrong, and we do have concerns about people. Sometimes these are what we call low-level concerns. So sometimes these are, you know, just concerns which we think, okay, this person just needs to look at our code of conduct or our guide for tutors again. This person just needs a bit of a word about their behaviour. Or, you know, you might find that they've said something to someone and you think that's not really appropriate for someone representing my business, and you just want to have a chat with them. It's a low-level concern. However, sometimes concerns do meet the harm threshold. Essentially, the harm threshold is when someone's not suitable to work with children because they've possibly committed a crime against a child. They might have caused significant harm to a child. So we don't have to prove that ourselves. We refer to the LADO, the local authority designated officer, and they will manage the situation. They will instruct other people to carry out an investigation. So never investigate an allegation against a member of staff if you feel it might meet that harm threshold. And if you're not sure if it meets the harm threshold, you can phone the LADO for advice. So you can consider then suspending the tuition. it is unlikely that the LADO will know what to do in a tuition situation. In a school, it's so much easier because we've got a massive HR school business manager, you know, who can help out with all the legal stuff. You might just like to do a risk assessment and think, okay, should I suspend this person from working with that child or that family? Or, you know, and what are the implications there for that person and for that child? Obviously, if a child is at risk of significant harm from the situation, then you're going to have to do that because the police will probably be involved anyway. But in some cases, it's a bit more challenging. So again, do ask for advice if this does happen to you and you're not sure whether that person should continue working with the child or family while that investigation is ongoing. After a substantiated allegation comes through, so a substantiated allegation is one where it's been proven, and essentially that means that that person is going to be referred to the DBS and has been removed from that regulated activity with children. You have to do that part of the process yourself. You have to refer to the Disclosure and Barring Service. So just really, really important that you do that, because no one else is going to do that for you. If you don't do that, or refer to the equivalent in Scotland or Northern Ireland, then that person could potentially move to another area and they could carry on working with children. So you need to do that referral. And again, I can help with that if you need help with it. Make sure that any allegations, including low-level concerns, are recorded. If it is a low-level concern, I would just inform the person that I am recording it, and I would just ask them to check it, that they're happy with what I've recorded. You know, generally people are, and they're a little bit embarrassed about it. And then you might say, okay, low-level concerns are removed from your record after this period, whatever that might be. And it's generally when they leave. But if it's a very, very small concern, for example, they posted something on Twitter, you challenged them about it and then they deleted it, and you've checked and there's nothing else, you know, and it's been 2 years or something, then you might well remove it. You might, the risk assessment that you undertake informally might say, actually, you know, we can take that off. But if you are referring to the LADO and there's an investigation, once that investigation has concluded, you must remove any reference to false or malicious allegations against a tutor. So those must be removed as soon as the investigation has been concluded. It's slightly more complicated with the other types. So I've just done a little screenshot on the next slide from Keeping Children Safe. So substantiated, unfounded and unsubstantiated allegations. We got 5 outcomes from allegations. False and malicious, take them off immediately. Substantiated is when it's been proven, that has to stay on. Unfounded and unsubstantiated also stay on. The reason for that is because if that allegation comes up again for that person, so if a child makes an unsubstantiated allegation and then 5 years later the parent thinks, oh, I still hate that person, I'm going to bring that up again, but there's no record that actually it was found to be unsubstantiated at the time, that will trigger another police investigation. That's really not fair on that tutor. So that's why we keep substantiated, unfounded and unsubstantiated. The LADO will tell you the outcome of the investigation, and then you will decide whether or not to keep that information based on the outcome. But it is really important that people are not faced with the same allegation again, because a parent or a child who is now an adult decides they're going to bring it up again for whatever reason, and actually it was found to be unfounded, which means there's no basis for it, or it's found to be unsubstantiated, which means it's not correct, there's no evidence to prove it. So really important that you do keep those as well. And it's just to make sure that in 2 out of 3 cases the educator adult is protected, and in the other case to make sure that that adult cannot go on and work with children somewhere else. Okay, so this is my kind of summary, and then I'm going to come to questions if that's okay. Have a clear policy and procedure, stick to it. If it doesn't work, change it. So if you have a situation and you think, okay, my policy didn't work there, just review it and change it and update it so that it does work for your organisation. Trust your gut. We are all people who work with other people, and if we didn't, we wouldn't be any good at the roles we're doing. We are people. So trust your gut. You're normally right. Act quickly if there is a staff allegation. So if you are in any way concerned about a tutor who you have engaged, you can phone for advice from Children's Services. And you can also ask us for support at TTA. We're here to support you as part of your membership. If anyone here is not a member, you can join easily, and I'm sure Sam will say something about that at the end as well. I'm not sure if we've got any non-members here anyway, but you might be watching this on YouTube and you might not be a member. Feel free to join. And remember that no recruitment is completely safe. If you have done your work, your due diligence, you've followed your policy, you've done all the checks you possibly can, then you are on the right track. And unfortunately, people are determined to get through. But hopefully 99.9% of the time they don't. Okay, so questions and anything from Sam?
Should we go from, so Danny's, or the first question is from Danny, how can we tell, oh, I feel like that's more of a comment. Sorry. Danny, what was
it wasn't my question, it was more of a comment. Hold on, did you hear that? Yeah, so my question, actually I have two. One is, you were talking about panel etc, and like you have caught the panel gets uploaded before actually the information gets to DBS, but what if it takes 2 years to get to panel? Because it can take very long to get to panel.
Oh, the teaching regulation. Yeah, I know. And then you have to hope that people have disclosed, don't you? If you're asking them to sign a self-declaration and they know that they're about to go in front of a panel, even if it is in 6 months or a year, you would hope that they would fill that in. If you find they've made a false declaration, and actually they were about to go in front of a panel to face allegations of something which would mean they couldn't work with you, it is actually a criminal offence to make a false declaration about responsibility to work with children. So I would refer that on to the police if I found out that had happened.
Okay, so say someone left a job, they have said that they've left the job because of this reason. There isn't a panel organised, there's nothing on the DBS. Like, it's really impossible for us to know, well, what to do, because to us there's no safeguard in there. Do you know what I mean? Like, there's still these gaps, and then what happens if, like, we then do obviously that running DBS check and then something comes up, then we have to obviously look at our safeguarding again. But it's impossible to really get rid of all of those gaps in safeguarding.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's why it's called safer recruitment.
Yeah,
I tend to agree with you. But I think the self-declaration is key here, because if someone lies on that, that's pretty bad.
Yeah,
that's not acceptable.
And I guess really what we need to be to safeguard us from people lie, because people do, is that we need to be getting everybody to sign a safer declaration. To say, like, the self-declaration, to say that they are not this, because we have nothing to come back on and say, well, there's the self-declaration.
Yeah, you've got your policy, you've got your self-declaration, you've got anything that came up at interview, and yeah, I mean, if somebody lies on the self-declaration, that's their fault.
Yeah,
yours.
So my second one is about destroying the DBS. So we don't need to give it back to the person because they pay for it themselves.
I'm not talking about the original copy. I'm talking about any copies that you've made.
So we shouldn't be storing photographs of them.
No.
Okay.
No, don't destroy the original. No. They should keep that. But obviously, if you've scanned it or anything, just make sure that you don't keep a copy any longer than's needed.
Okay. All right. Thank you. That's it. All of my questions so far.
So next in the chat, Juliet has said, I had someone contact me as an agent who claimed to be a teacher, but I had serious doubts about their honesty as they copied my website word for word, including my teacher profile, which was listed on their website. How can I do checks and report them? I have, of course, decided not to work with them.
Oh, I'm not sure I can answer that question, Julia. I'm not sure what you would do if someone's copied your information. I think John would be better placed to answer that. Do you mind emailing him to ask him? Because I feel like it's more of a legal thing, unless you want to say anything more about it.
I'm not sure.
Yeah, my advice would definitely be ask John about that. It seems to me a legal issue. That's fine, Juliet, no problem.
So Julia, I will send the recording afterwards, but we don't usually send slides for the CPD Live. Juliet has then also asked, how do you check QTS?
I'm just thinking I'm going to put the documents that I've referenced in the slides into the chat as well. Yes, Julia, I was just going to do that. But let me just go back to that QTS. I believe you can check QTS online. Eleanor's nodding. Eleanor, do you mind saying that? Will I just go back and put these links in the slides and how you check QTS? Thank you.
Yeah, so there is a bit on the government website called Check a Teacher Record. If you want, I will pop a link into the chat for it. You basically just need like their name, their date of birth, maybe their TRN number. But you just go on there and I just check it from there, and it tells you if they need to complete the ECT induction, if they've completed it, and what the outcome was.
Thanks, Eleanor. That's
Pop
brilliant.
that in the chat.
Oh, thank you so much. That's really helpful. Sam, what was the next question?
Talisha has asked, what type of questions can we ask for a mental health check? You're muted, Holly.
Sorry. I was just putting links in and doing two things at once, which is always a bad idea. So I would probably ask, have there been any periods of poor mental or physical health over the last 5 years which would affect your ability to work with children? Because you're linking mental and physical health there. You're not, but unfortunately, I'm only saying this because I have had a few queries around tutors who unfortunately have had periods of poor mental health, and then from the agency or business who's working with them, it has been quite difficult then to put support in place retrospectively. And I think, you know, if you know that a tutor who's working with you does, for example, suffer from anxiety, it's absolutely fine to put some extra help in place for them. So you could ask them to check in with you at the beginning and end of a lesson. You know, you can put extra support in place. If you don't know about it, you can't put any support in place. And that might mean that a really good tutor is lost because they're not able to continue with the job. So I just think it's about us putting support in place for those people before that issue becomes something which prevents them from doing their work properly. And it just enable that transparent conversation as well, that might just enable you to explore that. So Julia, yeah, that's a good idea. You can also put it on a form that you want them to fill in, but you could follow up anything in an interview, couldn't you, around anything they'd put on that form. And obviously you just put a statement on there as well, just reassuring them that everything is kept confidential around anything that they do disclose.
Rebecca has then asked, okay, that's more of a comment. Is that a question, Rebecca, or is it a comment? A comment, okay. Talisha has also asked, will the record keeping be relevant if you are working as an agency?
Talisha, do you mind saying a little bit more about that, about your question? Is that okay?
I think it was the slide, oh, I can't remember which slide it was now, but there was a slide about how long we keep certain things for. But just because as an agency, you'll say things about you not, the there's a phrasing. I can't remember the phrase, but there's a phrase for agencies that you need to make sure you're not doing these 3 things. And I'm just wondering if keeping records, I think it's for like low level issues, like if you're going to bring it to the ladder or if you're just going to keep it for your own records, could it potentially cause an issue as an agency? I know you're not.
Yeah, no, thank you. What I would say is that anything which is any information which is kept or shared in order to safeguard the welfare of a child, it overrides GDPR. So if you are keeping information because if you didn't keep that information, there could potentially be significant harm to a child, you're absolutely fine to keep it. So, you know, if you're thinking about an allegation which you've referred to the LADO, you absolutely need to hang on to that information, because if they need it in the future to safeguard that child and they ask for it, you have to provide it. And the thing with low-level concerns is if you feel that there might be a pattern which might result in an allegation which does meet the harm threshold, you should keep them. Because, so for example, I have had this a couple of times where somebody does not listen or does not take advice on board and carries on with the same behavior, and actually at some point they have to recognize they're just not suitable to work with children. And so if you hadn't held all of that information over a period of time, you wouldn't be able to prove that that was the case.
Perfect. Thank you.
Also, are you more is that question more concerned about the whole like agency versus business rules as well, in terms of?
Yeah, for both, like, because it's that balance of safeguarding as well as legal implications.
And then for the legal side, if you have any questions, John will always be happy to help with those as well. Especially, have you bought the compliance pack recently as well?
Yes.
Yes, so they, John and Julius will be like able to answer any questions, even if you think it's really small, like should I keep, I don't know, this very small piece of information, or am I going to be, you know, actually facing an investigation? If I do that, then they will be more than happy to answer those questions. But they are definitely, John especially is definitely the person to answer, not not. Holly, I just had a really quick question though, just going back to asking about physical and mental health at an interview. Are we allowed to do that in general? Because I thought, does that not leave you open potentially to then discriminating against that person?
As long as you're not, as long as it's for the purposes of safeguarding the child and of supporting the tutor. So you just have to state what the purpose of it is. So it's not about making a decision whether they're fit to work. It's about safeguarding, making sure that they're supported. Because actually, in an online tutorial, you don't particularly need good physical health. But I think if for example somebody has been self-harming or has had suicidal thoughts, and actually there is a risk then that might occur within that tutorial, that those suicidal thoughts have been expressed. This again is something which I've experienced in terms of other people. It is important to know about that, because there needs to be a procedure then in place to say, okay, if that happens, just end the lesson calmly and then seek support. And if you don't know about that kind of thing, you just can't put that in place. And we've got to keep the child's welfare at the centre of all our decision making. And that's what I always come back to, that if someone needs to disclose something which could potentially, if they don't disclose it and they don't get the proper support, it could potentially put that child at risk. I think that's more important than anything else.
Danny?
So that worries us a bit because of equality, like being like anybody could say, oh, we asked this because we wanted to keep the child safe. So it kind of worries me really, because yes, we could go to TTA and ask them for advice every single time, but yeah, there's nothing to really fall back on if somebody then comes at you and says, you broke my whatever, right?
Yeah, and the person doesn't have to answer the question. They don't have to disclose it. If you say we're just asking these questions to check if there's any additional support required for you while you're doing one-to-one tutoring with a child, here's the question, and they choose not to answer it, fine. If they show something, then that's up to them, isn't it?
Yeah. My other question was, oh no, it's gone out of my mind. Something else I was going to ask. It'll come back to me, I think.
Julia.
Oh, hello. You know, with the DBS, if you check, you know, when you check the record and you check the update service, I put one in the other day and it said it didn't recognise the number. Is that me putting it in wrong, or is there likely to be something wrong with the certificate?
I'm not sure. Danny, do you know the answer to that?
Yeah, so it means they're not on the update service. So when it says that, they haven't registered for the update service.
Or they did
Thank you.
register and their card has since run out and expired, and now they're not on the update service.
Yeah.
Okay,
Or
thanks.
maybe they're using their maiden name, but again, if you've got all of their details, then technically they've said this is what my DBS is, and you've got their like a copy of their passport, and it shouldn't match. But
I've seen the DBS certificate, so I'll do it again and just check.
Yeah. So we use all of the information that's on the DBS to check the update service, and normally when that comes back, it means that they haven't registered for the update service.
Thanks.
Or they have, and they haven't paid the renewal.
Yeah,
Thanks.
which is more frustrating because I feel like a lot of people just don't get their notifications and then they're not on it anymore. Cool. Any further questions? Nope. In that case, thank you all so much for joining us this morning. Thank you, Holly. It has been a really, really interesting session. For everybody that's joined us live for the full session, you will receive a link to the recording and your certificate shortly. For anybody who is watching on catch up, then if you register for any of our future sessions, as long as you participate in the full session live, you will be able to get a certificate and 1 CPD credit for that as well. So have a great day, everybody. And yeah, we'll see you really soon.